notes for each training, for each year. One of the problems is yeah. Critically going to fail. That would be really cool. Because I'm thinking if you want to take this next step, I've been reading this the past few days. There are some political scientists who are trying to create synthetic survey data based on
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so yeah, that's like a case. We just have next year with that profile. Exactly.
I mean, here's the thing, they're limiting on this right now. Like, it's okay.
So we actually like we can take away. At this point, that's one it is like most people are one. There's a lot of people on this list. Yeah, just wanted to make sure Chris was aware of the other side. Find the book on what. It's way more. That's how I wanted. I just want to make it so important to be able to review it. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
It is good.
It's crazy. I think you're in the right spot. Come on in.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a
This is the
okay, it's 12:30. We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for coming today, and thanks to those who are on Zoom, wherever you are. I guess I don't know. The camera doesn't work. Doesn't matter. Okay, thank you all for coming to the first two presentations of our inaugural class of the IIDS Generative AI Fellowship. In case you don't know what this class was and what this fellowship was an experiment to help people understand how they can integrate generative AI into their research. And we wanted to help do this because we saw the potential of it, and we also didn't know exactly how generative AI could be. So until we knew what researchers needed, we couldn't fully realize what IIDS, RCDS can offer. And so with that today, we have two very exciting presentations. They'll both present, then we'll have some time for questions at the end. We have Dr. Miranda Wilson, and then we have Dr. Tyler Bland. So Miranda, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miranda Wilson. I'm professor of cello and music history in the Lionel Hampton School of Music. Before I start talking about my project, I just want to express my huge thanks for the IIDS Fellowship in Generative AI. Michael and Barry, when you initially contacted me about this, I had no idea how game-changing and life-changing it was going to be, so thank you. Before I tell you about my AI project, just a little bit of background about where this all came from. So I'm a cellist and also a music historian, and I recently co-authored a book with two others in which we read every book on violin, viola, cello, and double bass technique ever written over the past 300 years. And then we summarized them and put them into this handy reference book, which itself is a very long book. We wrote this book because we had observed that our colleagues in K-12 string education maybe didn't know about the wealth of resources that were available to string teachers. Most music teachers will inevitably teach their own students the way that they were taught by their own teachers. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you'll have a student for whom your usual methods do not work, and people simply weren't aware of this. They're all overworked professionals, so we read hundreds of books so that they wouldn't have to. Now, many of the books that we read had never been accessible in English. Between us, we had some language skills that we acquired the old-fashioned way. Between the three of us, we could read in French, German, Spanish, Italian, Hungarian, Serbo-Croatian, and Russian. My contribution was French and German. But yeah, I will fully admit the only foreign language I speak well is French. Not so much with the German, which is actually a problem because a great deal of the research in my field is from Germany. So we pulled our language skills, we helped each other out. If something got beyond our collective language skills, we would simply get Google Translate on our phones, point it at a page, scan the page in, get the text from that, and away we would go. It's fairly crude and laborious, but it got the job done for what we needed it for. We weren't trying to translate entire books. But then after the book was published and the feedback that I got from it, I thought we have so much material in the cello world that people simply don't know about because they can't access it. And then I did want to translate entire books. Specifically, I wanted to translate a book by this guy, Hugo Becker. He didn't have 3 arms. This is an early adoption of photo editing technology. If you look closely, you'll see the 3rd arm is painted on. This is a pedagogical picture that is designed to teach cellists the correct trajectory for your arm if you are going to pull your bow at a right angle to the string. Now, this is something that you have to do, otherwise you won't make a good sound. If you have ever heard a beginning string player making a rather terrible noise, this is because they haven't gotten their right angle yet. It's more difficult than it looks. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So Becker was one of the top cellists of his time, and we know this because he was also an early adopter of recording technology. I have put a recording of him in the last slide of his presentation, which I'll share with a QR code if anyone's interested in listening to it. But more than that, he was a professor at conservatories in Frankfurt and Berlin, like the best schools in Europe. So in the early 20th century, Hugo Becker picked up a book by a guy called Friedrich Steinhausen, who was a scientist in the relatively new field of physiology. Steinhausen was also an amateur violinist. And he wanted to find out, exactly what muscle groups and movements are involved in the action of violin bowing, and how can we use this to our optimal advantage to play the violin better. Becker became intensely excited about this work, and he wanted to write a book that would adapt these principles, but for the cello. Now, Becker was a cellist. He wasn't a man of science, so he employed somebody who was a physiologist called Doug Runau, and together they went through many years of research, and in 1929 published the book on the right, Mechanik und Aesthetik des Violoncellspiels, meaning the mechanics and aesthetics of cello playing. So why is Becker's research important? Why should we care? 3 reasons, really, which correspond to the 3 sections of the book. The mechanics. Becker was the first person to ask, what are the biomechanics of cello playing? How do we do it better? So the image on the left of the slide, this is a line drawing showing the principle of what you have to do with the joints of your fingers, wrists, elbows, and shoulder to get your right angle with the bow and the string. Now, the image in the middle, this big block of text, this is pretty amazing too. This is from the 2nd section of the book, Aesthetik. This is Becker telling us how we should interpret Antonin Dvořák's cello concerto. Now, that's one of our best pieces for cello, super famous piece. However, we don't actually know anything from Dvořák himself about how he wanted the piece played. It doesn't matter because Becker knew Dvořák, and you bet he asked him. So, this chapter of the book is Becker's performance analysis of how to interpret this piece according to the composer's intentions. This is like gold, because Dvořák was alive at a time when recording technology had almost not happened yet by the time he died in the 1890s. So we have huge gaps in our knowledge about performance practices. Becker's research fills in those gaps. Finally, on the right, this is from the Anhang, the appendix to the book. Becker did something that no one had ever done before in the 1920s, which is that he hired a film crew to make a sort of movie of him performing the techniques that he had written about in the book so that people could see what they looked like. Then he used the still images from these films just to demonstrate the techniques. So the image on the right is that is there demonstrating all the things you've got to do to pull your bow straight and what they look like from different angles. Now, in an age where this information was much harder to come by because there weren't videos and there wasn't normal technology, this was huge. People could access this information. They could see what it looked like and they could understand what it was supposed to sound like. So you might be thinking, if this book is so great, why doesn't anyone know about it? Why is it not in English? There are various reasons for this. I don't really know the reason, but I suspect it had something to do with the fact that Becker kind of got in his own way by being a difficult person. I've been reading the memoirs of some of his famous colleagues and some of his students, and they all say, yeah, Becker, I really liked him, but he was just so dogmatic, people couldn't handle him. His students said that in terms of the private cello lesson, it was like his way or the highway. And college students of the 2020s don't like this sort of thing. Students in the 1920s didn't like it either. He was not a beloved man. It's really a pity. He hoped his book was going to be this giant blockbuster. However, it fell into what I think is very undeserved obscurity. So one person has translated this book before, an American cellist called Gordon Kinney, who in 1978, he translated it and I guess he put it on some microfilm. This microfilm still exists. It's housed in 4 or 5 research archives around the United States. For various reasons, I've never been able to get my hands on this microfilm. It turns out the material is actually kind of fragile and prone to deterioration. So librarians, they're not going to send it to you on an interlibrary loan. They invited me to come and look at it myself, but I don't get to Lexington and Tulsa that often, so I wasn't going to do that. I asked if I could pay them to make it into a PDF or something like that, but they told me that this was not possible. I've never seen it, neither have any of my other cello scholar colleagues. I don't even know if it's that great of a translation. So it became obvious to me, if I wanted this book translated, I was going to have to do it myself because nobody else was going to do it for me. Or were they? So when Michael and Barry approached me to see if I would be interested in this fellowship, yes, please. So they told me that AI was capable of the most amazing feats in translation. Now, I hadn't used AI for translation before. I was an early adopter of Google Translate when it came out, in I think 18 years ago. Large language models are initially developed with a focus on translation. Google Translate used to be this really handy resource for translating individual words. That's what I used it for. I used it like it was a dictionary. But in the beginning, it was not that great at translating entire sentences. Of course, it improved exponentially, and now it's really pretty good. But it still wasn't going to translate an entire book for me. My problem was, how can we use AI to translate specialist technical terminology, cello-specific vocabulary, and musical analysis that makes sense in context? So in these regards, traditional machine translations still seem to fall short. And I was inputting large amounts of German text into various LLMs with some pretty decent results, especially once I learned some prompt engineering techniques as part of my fellowship here. But I wondered if there were a way to overcome the limitations. Now that is when the wizards came in. By which I mean Luke and John. I am firmly convinced that these gentlemen are geniuses. They're definitely magicians. I am indebted to their tremendous skills. In many ways, this project is more theirs than mine. They opened my eyes to ways to use artificial intelligence that I had never dreamed of. What they did was to create an end-to-end generative AI workflow using several AI models in discrete stages. So the version of Becker's book that I had was a rather badly scanned PDF. And Luke and John used computer vision to convert images of the pages of Becker's book to German text. To do this, they used OpenAI's GPT-4o model, a multimodal large language model with very strong vision capabilities. Doing this, they converted the roughly scanned images into text files. Next, they wrote a Python script that saved every page of the 144-page PDF to a separate PNG file. They used the OpenAI API to submit the image to the GPT-4o, and they asked the model to return the German text and then saved the German text as files locally. Next step, They used a collection of 5 LLMs to perform individual translations of the extracted German text into English. The idea was to have each model independently attempt the translation, thinking rightly that each would have its strengths and weaknesses. Next, they used a powerful reasoning model to analyze the collective set of translations from all of the LLMs to look at where they agreed and disagreed, and why, and hopefully to derive some insight into alternative translations and result in an optimal final translation. So these were the models that they used. And at the bottom of the slide, I have shown the prompt that they used. So they created individual translations of Becker's book by each of these models and aggregated the results into one set of 5 AI translations per page. Next, what they did was to use OpenAI's O1 reasoning model to perform a careful analysis of the 5 independent AI translations for each page produced. The instructions were to compare and contrast the translations and identify and analyze specific important places where the AI models disagreed. They also asked O1 to resolve each specific disagreement and explain its reasoning for how it resolved each discrete translation conflict. Finally, they asked O1 to consider all of the 5 independent translations and reflect on its own analysis of where they differ to produce a final resolved translation. Crucially, they provided context about the nature of the original book and the current audience, which influenced decisions on translation, grammar, and word choices. So this is the prompt that they used for that. The final result is a set of 144 PDFs, each one corresponding to each scanned page of the original 144-page PDF. So these contained the original scanned image, 5 translations from the ensemble of AI models, a detailed comparative analysis of the 5 translations by the OpenAI O1 reasoning model, and the final resolved translation provided by the model. So they told me that running this workflow was more or less fully automated by a set of Python scripts and took about an hour and cost about $150. So the workflow utilized the strengths of several AI models to produce the best possible translations. And it's also conditioned based on explicit content, such as background and final audience. So this translation was hugely superior to a generic tool such as Google Translate. Now, I've included some excerpts of what this looks like on the slide. As an expert in cello technique and terminology, I was absolutely amazed. Now, of course, I checked the aggregate translations side by side with the original German text, but I found them faultless. And just to check that I wasn't making up stories, I did consult an expert in German to English translation who has an understanding of musical terms, and he said, can't fault it. Absolutely great. So I had to add a handful of tiny edits here and there, but really I feel like Luke and John did my project for me. This was amazing. So this gives some examples of a paragraph of the German text where Hugo Becker is talking about a bow stroke that is called the détaché stroke. That means where you go back and forth and you do not slur your notes together. In the music world, this technique is very often misunderstood. People just don't understand what the term means, and Becker's explanation of it is really, really good. Now, here, there's a translation analysis that I love. So there were some moments that made me smile in this project, and here is one of them. At one point, Becker says, when talking about a non-optimal cello tone, he says, don't make a howling sound on your cello. One of the LLMs mistranslated this as, don't be a celery munching cellist. Oh no. I'll never read it again. So for me, really, this project, it changed everything. Very significant outcomes from my point of view. First, access. This is going to be the first accessible English translation of Becker's work. I plan to publish this as an open access educational resource with the University of Idaho Library. Anybody with an internet connection will now be able to read this for free. Secondly, the methodology. Luke and John have created a replicable methodology. Potentially, we could now translate any book on any subject from any language into any language and need little further editing. Next thing, I think that what has been accomplished really validates AI-assisted translation for highly specialized content. My content, I'll be the first to admit, my field is kind of niche. I was not expecting this to be this good, but I thought it was incredible. So this work not only increases access, but it enhances learning. I really think that we're going to disseminate research a whole lot more easily from now on. Of course, the use of tools like this comes with its own set of ethical considerations. So translation is not my field. I'm a cellist and music historian. I saw this project as a means to an end. I wanted to get something done. It would have cost me thousands to hire a professional translator who likely wouldn't know the terminology. So to me, this is just like, great, I'm going to get the job done. However, early in my project, I made the naive mistake of joining a social media group of professional translators to ask them innocently if any of them were using AI to do their jobs. They chased me off the internet with their pitchforks and flaming torches. So that was great. But yeah, my inbox was full of angry messages for days. Several of them said to me, and I quote, "AI is laughably and terribly bad at translation." Others claimed that what I was doing was academic dishonesty and encouraging others to perpetrate academic dishonesty, and quite a few accused me of trying to put them out of work. Now, these are important conversations. We should have these conversations. It is important. I'm going to address their first point, which is I think we have established now that AI is not bad at translation. Now, it depends on how you're going to use it. If you type some unspecific or vague prompt into ChatGPT, you likely would not be very pleased with your results. However, using the kind of sophisticated procedure that Luke and John did, you can get the most remarkable and very useful results. As to the other arguments, as a creative professional, I'm very sympathetic to the anxiety that developments in technology are going to replace human skill sets. As musicians, we've been going through this for a really long time. Over a century ago, when recording technology started to improve, there was a lot of very significant anxiety. And one of the people who was anxious was the American composer John Philip Sousa. You probably heard Stars and Stripes Forever. That was one of his big hits. John Philip Sousa really opposed recording technology at first, and in 1906 wrote an angry essay called The Menace of Mechanical Music. I've linked it here if anyone wants to read it later, in which he expressed his anxieties. He thought that recordings were going to ruin music. He thought no one wanted to go to concerts anymore. He thought that children would not like to learn instruments anymore. And he thought that one of the nicest things about making music, which is the community aspect of it, was going to go away. He thought people would be locked in their living rooms with their gramophone and they would never come out and interact with each other and make music together again. None of these things actually ended up happening, and part of that was due to the actions of Sousa himself. 3 years after authoring this essay, Sousa was one of the people behind the passing of the Copyright Act of 1909, which protected musicians' rights and really shaped the future of the music profession because it ensured that musicians would get credit for their creative work. After this, Sousa himself made a fairly tidy profit from recording technology himself. He recorded several of his own compositions, which, as well as just being really interesting to listen to, for people like me who study historical performance practices, these are crucial primary documents in the performance of music. In other words, what Sousa did was to get in front of what he initially saw as a problem, assimilate the thing that he thought was a problem into his own skill set and use it to further his own career. That is what I hope to do myself with the new developments in AI and my own research. This project represented more than just a book to me. It was proof of concept, first of all, for making AI part of a skill set to make specialized knowledge more accessible. As we continue to refine the methods, we're creating tremendous potential for increasing access to knowledge and really fostering some international conversations and collaborations, and language barriers don't have to be part of those anymore. So thank you so much for attending my presentation, and I would welcome any discussions that you would like to have with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Questions?
I mean, we'll take one now just so you get a chance to.
You want to take one? I can mark.
Oh, sure. I just want to like eject the.
Yeah.
How
Well, anyone
am I
have a
gonna do
question
that?
for
There we
Miranda
go.
once she gets this transition question? Alex, go ahead.
yes.
I just curious. So what I write in my syllabus to my students, when they do use some tools,
Yeah.
they need to quote them. I'm just curious, so the AI models will be the quoter of the book or the book translation book? I'm just curious,
Yeah.
how it will be listed in a library. So we have like an AI written book together with the human. That's
Yeah,
kind of-
absolutely, and that's a really important point. And yes, I plan to do the translation with AI assisted technology, and I also plan to get a huge one with this. I didn't do this myself.
But yeah, I'm just curious how we can put their names in an author's list. That's kind of challenging.
That I don't know.
Yeah, that's like a.
I believe there are some librarians who are on it,
Uh,
so I'm going to consult them.
yeah,
Well
I
said.
may do this as well.
Great job. Great job. Well, Tyler, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Go on ahead. It's your time.
Drag this out of the way. All right, hello. I'm Tyler Bland. I work in the WAMI program here. So that's our medical school just down the street. I teach first and second year medical students. A little bit of background on kind of the project first, and then we'll get into what I developed. And so this is titled Alien Parasites Within, where I developed a movie or a short film, and we'll see how I did that. You can work. So first, I teach pharmacology at WAMI. This is a lecture based on the anti-malarials. And so how malaria works is a mosquito bites you, it injects the parasite, it then goes into their erythrolytic cycle where they actually get inside of red blood cells, replicate inside, which can then explode the red blood cells. They're released, picked up by a mosquito, and then this is how the transmission of malaria works. Certain types of malaria can form what are called hypnozoites. I promise this will make sense to you in a little bit. These are up here in the liver. The problem with these is that all of our drugs treat malaria in the blood, except for one. And so if you're infected with that type of malaria, you need a special drug to kill the ones in the liver, or else it'll keep coming back and back and back and back. For all of my classes where I teach the drugs, we always end with a clinical case where we practice treating patients with these diseases with these drugs. What I tried to do is I tried to take either a celebrity or some famous person that has had said disease, base the case off of that celebrity, and then convert it into a fictional movie that that celebrity is in. Looking at this, I see that these get into red blood cells, they grow inside, and then they explode the red blood cell to get out. This, of course, made me think of the movie Alien. And so if you've never seen the movie Alien, see either Alien or Aliens, the first two, the rest of them are iffy. We have Ripley here, which is an astronaut out in space, and then we have the alien, which is the xenomorph. The reason why this made me think of malaria is that the replication cycle of the xenomorph is that it gets into a person, it replicates inside of the person. These are then called chest bursters. They get out, and then they grow into the adult alien, and the cycle continues. So of course, I thought of malaria with this. Now, again, before we get into the case, I have to explain one other aspect of what I developed in my class. And that being, this is an educational game that I am producing. It is similar to Pokemon, but all of the Pokemon in our game are monsters that represent something in the body. So for instance, this is the blood family, where the baby version is red blood cell, the adolescent is platelet, and then the adult is clot. And you can play this, grow them into each other, and learn about important aspects of these characters. The reason why I say this is that we're going to have red blood cell in this movie. We are also going to have, we're also going to have liver. So this is red blood cell and liver. Part of the educational aspect of this is that we bake visual mnemonics into their designs. So for instance, for liver, the liver detoxifies your blood. They produce and store proteins, fats, all this stuff. Also notice the animations here. These animations you will see in the video, these are not AI generated. These are artist produced. Almost everything else in the video that you will see though is AI generated. Okay. So I try to combine these two ideas together of malaria, rupturing red blood cells, mimicking Alien or the xenomorph in the movie Alien. And so I developed a fictional movie called Alien Parasites Within. You can see they're looking at an x-ray of a red blood cell medi here with a parasite growing in. This is malaria that will eventually burst the red blood cell. Now, one more thing before I show you. I try to convert some of these ideas into visual mnemonics to help my students remember them better. So the mnemonics that you'll be seeing in here, chloroquine is one of the mainstay treatments of malaria. I am representing that as colored wind, chloroquine, colored wind. It was rough. Artemisinin is another type of drug where I'm representing it as art therapy. Doxycycline is another anti-malarial drug. Doxycycle, so cycle of dogs, so we have a dog circle. And then the last one, primaquine, this will be the primaquine. I represent this as the alien itself, but also how it is treated, which we'll see here. And so now, go ahead, Luke.
Turn off the lights.
Yes, of course.
Now I'm scared.
This is based off of a horror movie, so let's watch. Okay, again, everything minus the Medi idle animations and a couple of the overlays are AI generated. So music, sound effect, audio, all of it. Let's go ahead and watch.
Because their friends, oxygen is a light photo emission. All right, let's go see how those doggies are doing. Which one are you doing?
Okay, I'm going to pause real quick. I don't think we are sharing on Zoom. So we're going to do this. This.
Thank you.
Now they should be able to see it.
And our last stop is the liver room. You're a big guy. Everything runs smoothly. I'll take that as a yes. Final systems check complete. All crew entering hypersleep. Next up, Arrakis and log. Oh. Here's to a smooth journey.
Alert, alert. Oxygen transport decreasing rapidly. Internal temperatures rising.
Mother, status report.
Oxygen levels at 75% and falling. Internal temperature increased by 2 degrees Celsius.
Okay, I'm headed to the infirmary. What in the world happened here? Mother, have we experienced any breaches, collisions?
I do not know. My data appears to be corrected.
Why wasn't I informed?
I do not know. My data appears to be corrected.
Why do I feel so off? Mother, why is there condensation all over the walls?
Internal humidity has increased by 15%. Cause unknown.
Okay, I'm at the infirmary. Let's see what's on the monitor over there.
Activating physician's log.
Dr. Martinez infirmary house 7 days post-incident. RBC medimals are rendered demonizing around the ship. The crew are also experiencing fever and increased fatigue. Oxygen levels are dropping and the crew continue to decline. We've identified a parasite inside the RBC medimals, which is causing the hemolysis. We've tried using colored nanobots dispersed through ventilation, the colored wind, to slow the parasite. Some didn't respond. We then attempted art therapy by projecting geometric patterns on screens surrounding the affected RBCs. RBCs in the dog area were not affected. They instinctively made a dog circle to seem to offer some protection. There are crew reports that there's something inside the ship that is injecting the RBCs, but its whereabouts remain unknown. We suspect it may be in the liver room, but we just don't.
The rest of the file is corrupted.
Okay, let's go to the liver room. It's hiding in the liver. It's using it to distribute the parasite. Wait, what's it doing? It's hypnotizing the liver. Mother, great. Hit it with colored wind. Face it. Try the art therapy. What? That didn't work either. Mother, scan the life form.
Life form identified as a primer queen codon species Vivax or ovale.
Okay, but how do I kill it?
Neutralize by piercing it with an object inscribed with its name.
Okay. You said Rylic.
Warning, life form approaching.
Take that, you beggar. The Reds. Mother, we need to get to the command deck.
Captain.
All right, I'm gonna pause it there for essence of time. You also heard at the very end like a G6. The reason for that is, one, that song is cool, but mostly individuals with G6 PD deficiency, it's a disorder. When they get that type of therapy, their red blood cells can explode. And so I was representing that as another visual mnemonic. Okay, how did I do this? I used many different AI models in order to produce even just a single scene. And so if we walk through it, we'll start up in the top left. I used both Stable Diffusion and Firefly to modify these character sheets to produce anime versions of both the George Clooney and Rebel Wilson. Rebel Wilson was the doctor in there, both of which have had malaria in the past. For almost all the other art outside of just the characters.
You share your screen.
Am I not sharing this one?
Yeah, sorry.
Thought we were. Use zoomies. Almost all the other art was developed with the Flux.1 dev model by Black Forest Labs. There's number 3. For all of the facial animations that I recorded myself saying those lines, and then I was able to transmit both of the facial animations and the lip movement onto a static character, either George Clooney or Rebel Wilson. So I did all of the dialogue. This was used, I used Live Portrait for this, which takes a driving video and then an output, either video or just single image. And I used image there. I also did all of that on a green screen background for them, because if I gave it this, the AI, a lot of times it will start animating stuff in the background, and to keep the background consistent, I just animated either George or Rebel on a green screen, and then chroma keyed that out and put them on the background. For the script, I used ChatGPT 01 preview in order to generate the script. The script was modified during the process as I was figuring out what exactly was possible using all of these other things and what was not, what was too difficult and what I could do. For the rest of the animations, I used mostly Kling AI, either 1.0, which allows you to design or designate directionality for animations, or Kling 1.5, which is a better animation, but you can't do that. So I use both, except for the very last red blood cell that exploded. That I used Pika Labs. At the very end, I didn't show you that, but the ship explodes. I used Pika Labs to explode the ship as well. For the soundtrack and all of the sound effects, soundtrack, I used Udio. Sound effects, I used 11 Labs. And then for all of the dialogue, I ripped the dialogue out of the videos of me saying it, and I plugged it into 11 Labs and had it change it into the voice of either George Clooney or Rebel Wilson. So it was my driving audio that it converted into a different voice. And so I put all of these together, a little bit of Photoshop and Premiere Pro magic, and that's what we got. Oh, I also wanted to say, there are free and paid tiers for almost all of these that I used. For this project, it cost me $85 total. To develop, this was about 10 minutes. To develop a 10-minute animated short typically costs between about $10,000 to $50,000. I'll give you some examples of some of the Kling generations. So for Kling, I gave it this as a starting animation. There was my prompt, walk, and it gave it that. This was the peak animation. That was the first frame I gave it, and I told it to explode the red blood cell, and it gave me that. For live portrait, you can see myself. This was me saying the lines and recording it. And then, so I gave it the driving video, and then I gave it a static image of George, and it moved that over. You can see a lot of warping here with the beard and the face with the head movement. You're very limited with moving the head here. It also doesn't like beards. Some of the challenges with this, of course, bad generations, so you have to re-roll a lot of these multiple times to get something that you like. Also, character consistency was tricky in order to maintain consistency, not only with characters, but with scenes. For instance, when he went to sleep, when he was yawning and then went to sleep, I had one of him awake, and I generated him going to sleep, and then I had another one of him awake or asleep and then waking up. The consistency between those wasn't good, and so I basically had to cut the face off of one and superimpose it on the other so that everything else remained the same. Censored models, this is something interesting that we talked about. In the footage you saw, one of the red blood cells explode. In order to do that, what I wanted was to have a clean hallway, and then to generate blood that splashed up onto the side. And here I was using Adobe Firefly to do this. So I had this one, I drew images where I wanted the blood, and I said, generate blood. It wouldn't do it. It was censored, and it said it is beyond its guidelines to do. And so what I did is instead I generated one with blood, circled them, and then cleaned it up, and then it allowed me to do it. And so instead of developing the footage forward, I developed the footage backward and then played it in reverse, and it worked. So there are workarounds for these. I trialed it with my students. I gave them a preference survey. We won't get into all of this, but basically they preferred this over the traditional cases in class. I asked them, which one do you prefer? A majority of them either preferred the movie or had no preference. A small number of them actually preferred the traditional cases. over the movie ones. I also had an open-ended response where I asked them why they did this preference. I used AI to do a thematic analysis on these responses. What I did is I gave a short, so here I'm using multiple LLMs. I used 4.0, 0.1 preview, and 3.5 sonnet. I told it kind of a general idea of what I was doing, what I was going to give it, and then gave them all of the output from the students that they gave me here. I use multiple prompting techniques in order to get the best results. First, I use persona prompting, so act like a brilliant medical educator. At the very end here, I used a 0-shot chain of thought prompt where it forces it to work through it in a stepwise manner to get the best output. This part of the prompt was omitted when using 0.1 preview, as it already does it endogenously. And then whatever its output was, I then had it reflect on itself using self-criticism just to see how well it thought it did. Most of the time it did pretty well. And then I took all 3 examples and then tried to combine them together into a single output. And this was the output. For most of the students that preferred the movie, they thought it was more enjoyable. It was easy to remember. They just overall liked it better. For those that prefer the traditional cases, this was theme 5. The traditional cases were easy to study from post-class. And then also some of the times they were too distracted during the movie to remember what was or learn what was going on, as opposed to a traditional boring case. Okay. If you do want to see the whole thing, you can scan the QR code. You can also just go to YouTube and look up parasites or alien parasites within. And you'll be able to see that there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll open up for questions what time we have. And I guess I'll hop on Zoom since we should just let people see they're here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
How long did it take you?
To develop that?
Yeah.
Overall, it took me probably about a month. A month from developing the script to the final output. For typical, and like I said, for typical animation for this, about 10 minutes, could take upwards to 6 to 8 months. And again, thousands and thousands of dollars. I also acted as director of cinematography. Like it was just me on this with the help from theater friends, being able to let me access some of these tools. Okay.
So I love it, but don't quit your day job in terms of the actor part, right? So I feel like, have you thought about, okay, so you're saying the lines and just because it's you and you're doing this stuff.
Yep.
Do you think would you agree with me that there's room to get, I don't know, some kids in theater or something like that?
Oh, 100%.
Those roles.
100%. I am not an actor.
Oh, we all agree. You have other strengths.
Yes.
I love it.
And so there are some other options that I can do myself.
Yeah.
And that is text to speech instead of speech to speech, where I just give it the text I want it to say, and then it says it. Typically, that is devoid of emotion, and so I think that would be even a further step down from just myself.
Yeah.
But if we had actual voice actors or even students that were more proficient in theater, that could be much better, or could really enhance these. Yeah.
So I imagine like the traditional boring cases are nice and clean and clear about like what the relevant things are, right? So for the students who thought that the film was a bit of a distraction, could you actually utilize that? Because I'm imagining in a real world context, you are going to have other kinds of distractions that you have to somehow filter out as you're trying to sort of do them. Some kind of
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. But yes, in medical school, we usually lay out, these are the important parts. This is what you should know. In the real world, a patient comes in and gives you this much stuff, and sometimes none of it has to do with their disorder.
Right.
And so it could be even as we abstract it further into fiction, we might be actually getting closer to reality in that sense. Over here. Luke.
So you're familiar, I know you're kind of up on the literature as far as new models that are coming out. I think a couple of really powerful sort of text to video generators and editors have come out recently. Where do you see this like in 2 or 3 years? How would You spent a month on this, what's
Yeah.
it gonna look like in 2 years?
That is a great question. One of the personal crises I had developing this is which tool should I learn in order to do it? And should I even learn it? Because whichever one I learn will be irrelevant within weeks. And so I cannot say what it will be like.
He's learning for free stock advice.
What it will be like 3 years from now. I think one of the sayings in the AI realm is this is the worst it's ever going to be. And so I think just the quality of the video output, the consistency in character, and it's something Miranda said is that when she was talking about playing a cello, she goes, this isn't easy. If it was, everybody could do it. I think in some areas like this, that's exactly what it's doing, is it's allowing everybody to do it. And so you saw how many different models I had to use just to develop this. I used 9+ models. I think in the future, what they're going to do, there might be 9+ models, but there's going to be one main hub where you can do all of that inside of one area, and it makes it even easier to do. So I think it lowers the barrier even further to make this. Barry, your hand is next.
I have a question for Miranda.
Okay.
So publishing the book is super exciting, but I'm curious whether you and Luke and John and Michael have discussed, what about a publication or something related to how that was done and all of the other translations, and will that data set be made available to other researchers in terms of evaluating things in that? Because that, not everybody wants to read that book, will be interested in that, but I feel like I would love to see that.
I think that the question for Luke and John. I very much hope that they will publish the findings. I think this changes everything.
I don't know if it's only a question. You know, like what don't.
I would love to do this, but I don't feel that it should be me that takes the credit for the methodology.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, I certainly want to put translation using out there.
Oh yeah, that's there's no question there. I just feel like there's this other piece. I don't know where it goes or how it gets published, but it just seems important.
Well, like you said, it's a reproducible workflow that we can apply to other translations. So I'm just curious, following along what Bear just said, like, do you have other translations in mind? Okay, good.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and so I think this approach, I think, could be generally useful for a lot of people. So yeah, finding a way to share it, yeah.
At this point, I feel that if we didn't, we would be withholding
Yeah.
really important information.
You have a question?
Yeah, also for Miranda, less of a question, more of a comment. So thank you. Like, I've been looking for arguments that people have made that, like, oh, this technology is going to like decrease our connections with one another, and like specifically about that. And so you just moved that back another like 60 years for me. So
What are the philosophers on the internet saying about this?
they're similar, right? But these arguments going back at least to the 1950s when the sort of philosophy of technology was first being introduced. And this, incidentally, one of them was actually specifically about improved cooking technologies. That, like, if it makes it easier and easier for people to like cook using a microwave, then people aren't going to spend as much time together in the kitchen, coming together and enjoying food together, right?
So everyone
And then
will
just
make their own dinner.
Yeah, it's just like another example of like, no, that didn't not quite how it worked out after all.
I said that about the phone.
I'll give one argument against it, though, just playing devil's advocate. When I was talking about the different people involved in making a movie, like the director, the cinematographer, all of that, this was me in my office by myself.
Yeah,
doing it. So it can work.
Sure, but allowing you to spend more time with your students, trying to hone your craft in terms of teaching them what they need to know.
I did spend less time in the classroom and more in my office too.
Oh. I retract that.
I'm still negative.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question, Tyler,
Yeah.
about the classroom. You know, you've already mentioned your initial findings about students' responses to your work, and I can see students really loving this. Is there some way that have you been measuring maybe their achievement in class since introducing this technology into your teaching?
Great. I've looked at achievement briefly between our site and between the other WAMI sites, just because they get the same curriculum. Our achievement seems to be on par with them. And so
in the drug realm, when they do a clinical trial and they try a new drug and it's not better, but it's the same, it's called non-inferior, because it was non-inferior. It sounds negative, but it still works. And so this is non-inferior, at least, in teaching them things, but they seem to prefer it. And so if it teaches them the same, but they like it better, we're a little higher up. Also, they didn't seem to prefer it as much over the traditional cases. If you look at my data, my bars were pretty close. I think the reasoning for this is that it was a Goliath versus Goliath battle, in that they love the cases that we do in class. They hold that above all of the other material that we cover. Sometimes they wish like just class was just cases. And so what I'm doing is I'm going against what they already love and trying to enhance that. And it looks like I was able to enhance it at least a little bit.
I would think these methods would really help them retain the information for longer.
That's the hope, because they use a bunch of other mnemonic devices in order to remember this stuff. Also, spoiler, like I use it for me to remember these things. And so now whenever I teach the anti-malarials, I'm like, oh yeah, colored wind, that was chloroquine.
Circle of dogs.
Yeah. I found myself like saying the drug names to say, the circle of dogs.
Oh, is there really? Oh, dogs, yeah, that makes sense.
I figured that out from that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember that.
You are now all experts in anti-malarials.
So this is a question for both of you. So ignoring the bigger question of what your of where things will go AI wise in the next few years, where do you see your use of AI going, both short term and long term? Right? What do you plan on doing next, and what do you hope to be doing long term with it? So short term, long term.
In the short term, I hope to present at music teachers conferences just to introduce the idea that hey, this exists, and we now have access to a great deal more information in our field that is highly relevant to what we do. And the long term, who knows where it goes? But I hope that it means, because I plan to publish Becker's book as an open access educational resource, and I hope that others will do the same in the spirit of increasing accessibility. Not everybody can afford to buy my giant book about cello pedagogy, but anyone with an internet connection and an English speaker can read it.
That's great.
For myself, these are all of the movies that I am currently developing. So I continue to keep doing this. Right now, almost all of them are just text-based, as well as audio narration. And so as we walk through the slides read it out themselves. And so it's movie-esque, but I would love to turn all of these into actual movies.
I need to know about the Kiss Clots.
Clots goodbye. This is the case that we run in our anticoagulant lecture. Gene Simmons has atrial fibrillation and is treated with anticoags. And so in the case, we treat Gene Simmons. I haven't yet, but I will be generating a rock soundtrack for this case.
Rock opera case study. You'll be pioneer. I love it.
Yep. We recently published, where's the Selena Gomez one? We recently published Shattered Slippers. This is based off of the movie Another Cinderella Story. So this is another Cinderella story, where we treat Selena for lupus, diabetic kidney nephropathy, and then kidney transplant in our immunomodulatory lectures part 1, and then our transplant drugs part 2. And then we treat her again a year later. So this is a multi-month spanning case where we treat her for bipolar disorder in our brain block. And so my students, my students remember these cases. Because none of them ever come up to me and be like, oh yeah, I remember that 34-year-old male we treated in X class. No, nobody has ever done that, even the day after. But they will be like, oh, I remember the Selena Gomez case. And so I think it's sticking, hopefully.
Do you plan to share this with other WAMI sites, or is it just for us right now?
It is slowly getting integrated into the other WAMI sites. My problem is that I don't think I have fully explained what they are to the other leads at WAMI. And so when they run into these slides, they're like, what is this? I don't know what to do with this. And so that's on me. And so I think as I explain it better and get more data on how it is better, hopefully it'll get integrated more into the other sites. We go in the back.
So these are like used to reinforce stuff that you've already taught.
Correct.
So then you give them like all the colored wind equals, you give them all that, because when you showed these to us before, I didn't learn a thing. But now that you gave me all the preamble, it was very effective.
For this one, yes, I presented it to them exactly how I presented it to you.
Gotcha.
As I gave them the drugs, I go, we're gonna do a movie, here's what the mnemonics are, let's watch the movie.
Gotcha.
And then we've actually followed up with questions on the movie so they could practice it.
And this is maybe more a question for Michael. So in both of these, we see a lot of what would be interdisciplinary stuff happening. Theater, studio, and there, which is of great interest to me. I'm the chair of the music.
Oh, wonderful, okay. I had some help, kind of. I'll say something briefly.
And then with Miranda, is knowing that we're talking a lot about where would we publish it, and it's all, and I don't see any mention of discussing of their languages and international studies. Is there plans as these really cool, interesting projects expand outward? We're looking for where this will be published and how this works and what are the ethics and how does it affect translators of working with the other and connecting intentionally across campus to bring in the people that would maybe be able to help and comment and guide those discussions. Do that.
Yeah, I'll just, if you don't mind. I'll take one straight on. No, I think, okay, number one, what you're seeing here, this is the frontier of what's going on, obviously. Like, we are in the Wild West. There aren't rules yet. We're all, in some ways, making the rules up as we go. And so what that means is, you know, we started this, and I said this at the beginning, but we weren't sure what we needed to know and what we could offer. But we needed researchers who also kind of were in a different place, to be able to connect that. So you make a great point. There's an opportunity for a lot of multidisciplinary connection. What I think Miranda really touched on, if not said explicitly, is that AI is not necessarily something that replaces everyone. In fact, it might be a case to reinforce the need for disciplines that some people think are being pushed out. Yeah, I mean, Miranda's case does replace music translators. At the same time, it seems like a case where bringing you make a great point, like bringing some people in from the
International programs.
Thank you, international programs would be extremely helpful in actually finding other ways to disseminate this and be preferred audiences for this. You know, like the technical aspects of what Miranda did. It's I think it's really great, but I think it's of most interest to not necessarily a technical audience. I think it's more of interest to the people who need to use it for what Miranda's applications are. That's just me. I could be very wrong. There's the technical side. So my point is that, yes, I think you're absolutely right. And that's what Barry's point, I think, was too, when he was saying, like, what about bringing in theater kids? Because this isn't just you can become the hermit in your office building something. I'm not saying you're a hermit. I'm saying you could become one, you know. Or you can find this another way to actually create a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary connection. Because, I mean, what's the biggest thing preventing people from connecting? Generally, there's some sort of knowledge barrier, some sort of application barrier. And in some ways, AI is actually taking away that part of this. Okay.
So yeah, one of the most interesting moments during the Generative AI Fellowship meetings that we had was when I think, Tyler, you had played a soundtrack that you had created with.
Go ahead.
Okay, you played a soundtrack that you had created that was kind of, I think it was attempting to be sort of this adventurous soundtrack or like a pirate film or something like that. And Miranda immediately picked up on the aspects that were lacking from the AI generated song or music, and gave you recommendations for ways to change your prompt. That for the uneducated person like myself who doesn't know the difference, I would have never noticed that something was missing. But as soon as you changed the prompt and modified it, it was obvious that that was the right thing to do. So that was a fantastic leverage.
And we were able to do it there and then.
Yes.
Like, she gave me it and I plugged it in, and then seconds later we had the soundtrack.
And it was noticeably better for like an untrained ear.
Right.
To be fair, not every prompt I told him to do actually worked.
So I was gonna say that. So for this one,
Sound to make, I thought would produce something alien-like, and it didn't work.
I had her watch the Alien movie. I go, I want to replicate the soundtrack. What are the words? What are the words I need to use for the prompt? And so she gave it to me, and it was very technical. It was like Trello on 6.
Yeah, I see it. Put in some chordal harmonies, but it didn't know what that was.
Right, and so I put in this big long prompt that was very technical, and the output was terrible. Like it was horrible. And what it wants is different. It wanted like, I want something thematic and flowing and adventurous. Like that's the kind of adjectives that it was desiring to
So
develop.
with the two of you working together,
Correct.
made a better product.
Yep.
And I guess that's where I'm going with this. Is I am so sick and tired of the sky is falling and chicken little AI. I'm done with it. Like it's gonna happen. Move on. So since I know there are a lot of other people on campus who, and I understand why they do that. This seems like the seed to start connecting people and help them understand there's just a path forward. And to Miranda's point about I can't remember exactly how you said it, but how you would involve people. It has to be something going forward, because if we don't do it, oh, that's what you said. You said, I don't feel good about doing it, maybe they should do it. If you don't do it, somebody else that's not here is gonna do it, and you're just letting them take the credit. So, I don't know, there's no reason not to go forward however we can go forward. It's awesome.
Oh, one more point, and I wish Bert was still here.
Yeah.
He is of all the people I know, he drives the most effort at this university of interdisciplinary stuff around AI, ethics, philosophy, literacy, and he would have.
He and I always.
Oh,
Okay, that's right. You're right. Yeah,
Everybody knows Bert. That's just it.
okay.
We are soliciting for the next cohort of this program, in my group.
Yeah.
And there are there plans to, yes, the whole point of this, when Mike came up with the idea was, as an institute, we don't know what we don't know. And who are we to be the gatekeepers to this technology in terms of infrastructure and stuff? And so then when we got these nominations, and then out of class, we got this nomination for a musician, and we were like, okay, let's do it. And I'm so thrilled. And like that was the point, is to sort of figure out who's out there. Let's engage with them. Let's understand what the opportunities are and what the concerns are, and actually like do something.
And if I can make a plug there, when I got the request from Tracy Craig of anybody in your department, there was an obvious one, that was great. But one of the things that's a bummer for us is as tenure track faculty lines get less and less. I have 3 people off the top of my head that would be brilliant for this, but they're all on clinical lines. So and I was told to only submit people with research on it.
This is open to all researchers.
Yeah, awesome.
So that was like
a lot more people.
The first round was a dean recommendation. The second round is just some
Self-nominated.
Yeah, self-nomination. We're cool. Yeah.
No gatekeeping.
Yeah, I'll send you.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
make
send
sure
you
you
a lot
get
of
the invite.
people.
The 2 best things that I got out of this was, one, what are other people doing? Because like I'm in my sphere of AI. I didn't know people were translating or doing apps and stuff like that. And then 2 is what are our capabilities on campus here that are basically free options for us. Yeah, which is really nice.
I've loved it. I've loved interacting with all these people and stuff.
It is past 1:30. If you have to run, please feel free to. Don't feel trapped.
Yeah, we
Some
can.
of this conversation might keep going. This is great.
Clarification question. So I saw the soliciting email, so I did apply.
We know.
It sounds like you have to be done.
No,
That
no.
was last.
Okay, so
You're
it's
good.
different.
Yeah, it's different.
So you got me.
We know. Yeah, we're good. Last time we just, we solicited nominations. This time Michael is doing it more than.
With that? Okay.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.